For decades, we've been told that Napoleon Bonaparte conquered Europe with sheer genius and courage. But what if the truth is far more unsettling? What if behind every battlefield victory, every empire built, there was an invisible engine manipulating money, extracting resources and funding endless wars in ways history books have never admitted? France in the late 18th century was a nation on the brink. The monarchy was drowning in debt, taxation was chaotic, and the people already overburdened were facing skyrocketing bread prices and inflation. Ministers tried to reform the system, but entrenched privileges blocked meaningful change. By 1789, financial collapse was imminent. The revolution promised liberty, equality, and fraternity, but it could not promise stability. The revolutionary government issued the assignat, a paper currency backed by confiscated church lands. Initially promising, it soon collapsed under inflation, counterfeiting, and public distrust. France was a nation in economic chaos. Into this turmoil stepped Napoleon Bonaparte, not just as a military officer, but as a man who had observed the failures of both monarchy and revolution. He saw the connection between finance and power, between money and military success. He recognized that an empire without resources was doomed, and that debt, if wielded cleverly, could become a weapon. Napoleon's rise began in Italy in 1796. He transformed a financially depleted campaign into a self-sustaining war machine. Cities and provinces were compelled to provide loans and supplies. Local currency was exploited. Tributes were extracted, often without repayment. The army marched, provisioned by the very territories it sought to conquer. In Egypt, he tested the same principles on a continental scale. Resources were commandeered. Merchants were corrupted. Expenditures were meticulously tracked. Though the campaign failed militarily, Napoleon had perfected a model. Conquered wealth can fund conquest itself. By 1800, the Bank of France was founded, centralizing financial control. Napoleon could now direct loans, stabilize credit, and issue bonds, all while keeping domestic unrest at bay. His campaigns across Europe from 1805 to 1809 further demonstrated this method. Victories in Austria, Prussia, and Italy were financed by imposed tributes, structured debt, and systematic resource extraction. Conquered territories became financial extensions of France, paying for the very wars that subjugated them. Even the continental system of blockade aimed at Britain was not just economic warfare. It was a tool to redistribute wealth to France while pressuring allies and enemies alike. Napoleon understood that controlling economies could sometimes achieve what armies alone could not, but overreach was inevitable. By 1812, the invasion of Russia exposed the limits of this hidden financial system. Supply lines stretched impossibly long. Tribute from occupied lands was insufficient. Inflation, scarcity, and harsh winter conditions unraveled the illusion of endless funding. Armies starved. The treasury strained. The system had expanded too far, too fast. After Napoleon's fall in 1815, the financial consequences persisted. France faced massive debts and reparations. Europe struggled to stabilize post-war economies. Central banks strengthened, currencies were reformed, but lessons about the invisible power of finance remained partially forgotten. History, however, rarely stays buried. Napoleon's principles echo across centuries. World War I borrowed heavily from citizens to fund war. Occupied territories in World War II were forced to supply resources and pay tributes. Modern economies finance military interventions through debt, currency manipulation, and resource control, all invisible to the public eye. The patterns repeat. Extraction without stability, debt as a weapon, and invisible financial networks driving visible outcomes. Armies may fall, governments may rise, but the underlying mechanisms of power, money, debt, and control of resources remain constant. Napoleon's genius was in recognizing this centuries ago. His strategies show that war is as much fought in ledgers as on battlefields. Armies march only when funded. Conquests expand only when resources are controlled. Debt enables power, but overreach destroys it. And today, the lessons are alive. Central banks influence economies on a continental scale. Nations engage in covert financial warfare through trade, sanctions, and debt. Public awareness is limited, just as it was under Napoleon. Invisible currents of money dictate power in ways far more decisive than any battlefield maneuver. History may seem distant, but the hidden wars of finance are ongoing. The question is not whether history repeats, it is whether we are watching closely enough to recognize it. Napoleon's empire fell, but his strategies persist. Wars, debts, and invisible networks of finance continue to shape the world in ways most will never see. Understanding these mechanisms is not just academic, It is essential for seeing how power really operates today. Study the flow of money. Question the narratives behind wars and crises. Observe how invisible financial levers control outcomes. Napoleon's legacy is not in battles alone, but in the hidden engine of empire, and it is still running. The greatest victories are no longer measured on battlefields. They are counted in currencies, credit, and the control of resources. History's rhyming. The question is, are we paying attention?